me Billy Anger this morning to the platform.
All right. Hey, good morning. Wow, this brings back the memories. How many of you do I know? Raise your hand. All right, more than I thought. My wife and I walked into this church 1993, and our marriage was broken. Our family was in disrepair. We were headed for divorce court. And I came into this church, and this body of believers loved us. They accepted us. And Pastor Gary Simpson counseled and brought my family and my marriage back together. And in 1995, my wife and I left, and we've been in full-time ministry ever since. And we just celebrated our 37th anniversary. And where would we be? Where would we be if it were not for Christian Life Church? Now I look around, and most of you, well, your faces have changed. And a lot happens over the course of 30 years. I remember when we would sit over there during worship service, and Kevin McPhee would come out and pray. Boy, that's a long time ago. And then Pastor Jared came in, I guess, after Kevin. Justin, and then Pastor Jared came in. And I've had the privilege of establishing a relationship and friendship with Pastor Jared. And I feel confident your church is in good hands. Really good hands. And you guys are blessed. You guys are blessed. It's not every day that congregations have that kind of ministerial succession and that type of ministerial integrity. And again, this just brings back a flood of memories. I can't forget. I don't remember what year it was. It was sometime in January, and I got a phone call. My wife and I and our family were living back here in the apartment. I have no idea what that apartment looks like right now, but we were living in the apartment. We had 2 kids, a third on the way, and that apartment's got 1 bedroom. It was an adventure, to be sure. And I got a phone call early in the morning. It was Pastor Gary. He said, "I'm sick. I can't be in." And Pastor Kevin is sick. He can't be in. Can you preach the Sunday morning service? And so I said, reluctantly, yeah, I'll wing it. And that was like a highlight for me back in those days, and just fantastic memories. They even let me teach the adult Sunday school class for a number of years, if you remember that. And I did the book of James, the book of Daniel, and started the book of Revelation. And so I remember these things. I remember them well. And leaving CLC was one of the most difficult decisions that we ever made, but we launched out into full-time ministry. I traveled for 15 years doing the old-fashioned revivals, but they've kind of been outdated now for quite a while. And then I took a pastorate down in Fort Worth, Texas. And 5 years ago, I felt God sit on me. Now understand, God has a way of speaking. Well, he whispers first. He begins speaking. He starts to push. He starts to nudge, and finally he'll sit. And after the weight of his sitting gets to be so great, ultimately, for the sake of self-preservation, we break down and say, "Lord, now I surrender to your will." And so 5 years ago, I began traveling around the countryside doing what is called apologetics. As a matter of fact, Lindsay, if you'd give me that first slide, I would appreciate it. I think the first slide, not that slide. The first slide, the other direction, the other direction, the other direction. Can we go the other direction? We're only going the wrong direction here. But the name of our ministry is Amped, and it's not just some pithy name that I tried to think up. It's an acronym that stands for Apologetic Ministry, and it gives our motivation and our drive, and that is preparing educated disciples. That is what I do. My desire is to educate young adults, high schoolers, those in junior high and those in the university, so that they might be able to strongly and adequately and courageously and confidently defend their Christian faith. And so this morning, I would be somewhat remiss when speaking about apologetics if I didn't take you back 2,400 years to the city of Athens, Greece. That sounds exciting, does it not? But you really can't talk about apologetics unless you mention a guy by the name of Socrates. Socrates was known in Athens as a gadfly. A gadfly is simply a pesky insect that is known for biting livestock, and that's exactly what he did. He bit the establishment, and they could not stand him, provoking them to a place of deeper thinking. And because of that, a conspiracy began to emerge. 3 men conspired to have Socrates silenced. Now, the reason I'm giving you this history lesson is not for the sake of history alone, but someone once said that history repeats itself, and if we do not learn from the past, invariably we will make the same mistakes of yesteryear. And so I see an eerie parallel between Athens, Greece in 399 BC and the United States of America in 2025. Please hear what I'm saying. They wanted Socrates silenced, and so one of the 3 conspirators, a man by the name of Miletus the poet, filed charges with the magistrate in Athens, and the affidavit that he swore out accused Socrates of committing 2 different crimes. The first crime was he lacked piety or devotion to the gods of Athens, and then the second accusation, or the second allegation, was that he was corrupting the morals of the youth. Now, what I find interesting about their passion to silence Socrates is the fact that he was 70 years old at the time, and the average life expectancy in Greece was only 45. So he had long outlived his life expectancy, and yet there was an urgency in silencing Socrates because the students were beginning to listen. And the powers that be will not relinquish their stronghold easily. How many understand what I'm talking about? He depicted in his mind a contradiction between what he thought God should be and what the Athenian gods were. The Athenian gods were temperamental and they were unkind. And so he spoke out against the pantheon. He spoke out against Eros and Aphrodite's. Who else was there? God of the sea, Poseidon. They made a movie, I think, called The Poseidon Adventure. And Artemis. And of course, the god of all gods being Zeus. He spoke out against these gods and said, deity cannot be inconsistent. It cannot be unkind. If something is divine, it must be consistent and it must be compassionate. Even though he certainly did not subscribe to what we would call a Christian worldview. And so what he would do was, he would roam the streets of the city, he would go into the city squares, and he would engage conversations with whoever it was that would talk with him, the gadfly. And he would begin questioning the assumptions of the day. And what he did was, does this sound familiar? His conversations were based on asking the listener questions and getting the feedback from his audience. And then from that point, the Socratic method was, let's engage in conversation and come to a resolution who has the better of the ideas. Does that sound familiar? And they wanted him quiet. They wanted him silenced. Socrates actually saw himself, this is going to sound a little bit strange, he saw himself as a midwife. His father was a mason. stonemason, a carver. His mother was a midwife, and he saw himself as the midwife who allowed for and gave opportunity to the younger generation to birth their ideas and come into understanding about logic, reason, and how the world actually worked. And so this conspiracy of three men dragged him into what was called the People's Court. Long before there was Judge Wapner, there was the People's Court in Athens. And interestingly enough, Newsweek magazine reported in 1970 that they had completely unearthed and excavated the ruins of that ancient court. And so these three accusers stood on an elevated platform for 3 hours. We know that Lycon, the orator, would speak, and he would bring his prosecution against Socrates. Meletus would speak, but then the man that would spearhead, the ringleader of all this, a guy by the name of Anytus the politician, who came from a family of politicians, is the one that really drove home the point: this man needs to be quiet. He is speaking out against the gods of Athens. Now, this is interesting because Greece boasted the first democratic government that provided for all citizens the right and the privilege to speak their mind without fear of reprisal or recrimination. But the moment someone spoke something against the establishment wanted him silenced. And so after 3 hours, and they timed it by a primitive water clock, much like an hourglass, they sat down, and it was time for Socrates to give his defense. And of course, before a jury of 501 of his peers, all of them sitting on a wooden bench, most of them farmers, he gave his defense, and his defense was marked with genius. It was filled with humor. It was eloquent, but it was also a backhanded insult because he used sarcasm to completely undermine his critics. And he would go so far as to say, I consulted with the spiritual leader in the city of Delphi, the oracle of Delphi, and she tells me that I am the wisest of all men to have ever lived. Not really very intelligent, and yet he was profoundly intelligent. He would make the statement at his trial, the only thing that I know is that I know nothing at all. The longer that when I was here in 1995, I was 25 years old. I'm 55 years old now. I know I don't look it, but I'm 55 years old now. And the one thing I've discovered is these words of Socrates to be so true, because back in those days I knew everything. Now here I am, 55, and I realize I don't know anything. You understand and relate to what I'm talking about, all right? And so ultimately, he is found guilty. Give me the next slide, if you please, would please, Lindsay. These were bronze pegs, and what the jury would do was they would take their bronze peg, and according to the guilty or innocent verdict, they would drop the bronze peg into an urn. And by a vote of, 280 to 221, he was found guilty. And so they entered into the penalty phase of the trial, and they said to Socrates, if you pay a fine and silence your mouth, we will not execute you. What punishment do you think is just? And he said, I believe I should receive free meals for the rest of my life. I like Socrates. Refusing to silence, refusing to stand down, he determined that the sacrifice of his life would be worth the public statement. And then the next day, in the spring of 399, he drank a cup of poison hemlock, and that was the end of Socrates. A young man was standing there in the crowd, because not only were there 501 jury members, there were thousands of Athenian onlookers. And there's a man in the crowd. He's 27 years of age. He's pressed up against the fence. And at the end of the trial and following the death of Socrates, he writes a 57-page book called The Apologetic of Socrates. The man's name is Plato. And Plato writes the 57-page defense of Socrates. And there's where we derive the word apologetics from. It doesn't mean I'm apologizing or expressing remorse for anything. Instead, it means I am here to defend something. And I believe that the Christian worldview is worth defending because my faith is not a capricious faith. I do not jump into the deep end of the pool and hope I can swim, but my faith is built on the evidence that, in my opinion, is overwhelming and incontestable. Just a little aside. Don't ever tell anybody you can prove Christianity, because you cannot. Your answer simply is this: I have evaluated the evidence, and based on my investigation, it is the Christian worldview that provides me the greatest coherency and cohesion to my understanding of reality. And that's what I tell students all the time on these university campuses. All right, that is my introduction. You've got a long sermon. It's been 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States of America is engaged in a battle of ideas. And this battle is not only for the soul of our country, it is for the survival of our country. And the outcome will determine where our nation goes. And depending on the worldview that prevails, America will either thrive and be blessed, or America's best days are behind it. We have failed Gen Z. We have failed the millennials. And we are now failing Gen Alpha. 6 years ago, I had no intentions of traveling. This was not on my radar. I love being home at night, sleeping in the same bed, eating out of my own refrigerator. I thought my days of living in a suitcase or out of a suitcase in a hotel room were finished. But God has a way of sitting on somebody. And the nudge and the prod and the push were not enough. And so finally I saw some statistics that probably were all that was required to get back out on the road and travel. May I have you for a moment, young man? You're the pastor's son, I bet. May I have you, young man? I don't want to be accused of. Can I have you as well? You guys are good looking, you know, just handsome. I don't want to be accused of being a sexist, so can I please come here? You're opposed to this idea. Now, let me tell you why I'm here this morning. I'm going to tell you why I'm here this morning. Barna Research, Lifeway, and Pew Research. They are the ones that are plugged into the trends of the Christian church in America. They are the most reliable and accurate resources that we have regarding the trends and the trajectory of the church. And they all came out with the same report. And the report said this: self-identified Christians between the ages of 18 and 29. Self-identified Christians between the ages of 18 and 29. When they leave church, graduating from high school, go to university, trade school, or the military, 3 out of 4 of them are going to leave the church. In the course of their lifetime, one of those 3 that leaves will come back. That means the church is in a net loss of 50%. We are losing half of our kids. So I started researching it. Why is it? Number 1, lack of community. Number 2, they say lack of relevance. The church is irrelevant. Number 3, hypocrisy. Hypocrisy where the believer in the pew says one thing but lives something different. Hypocrisy in leadership where the leadership says one thing but lives another thing. And then another reason is because the church can't answer the most basic and simple questions that we are being posed on social media and in the university classrooms. The church cannot answer the most simple questions. And that's why we're seeing half of our kids leave the church and never come back. Thank you, guys. Give them a hand if you don't mind. That is why I am here this morning. I'd rather be back in Texas with my wife, enjoying the sunshine. She was in the swimming pool yesterday. And yet at the same time, I would rather be nowhere else than where I am right now. You know, it's an interesting thing. Jerry, back when I left out of here, back when I was 25 years old, my goal was to speak to thousands and thousands. Now here I am 55 years of age, and there is nothing that gives me a bigger buzz than speaking to a group of 12 teenagers who are vacillating between staying in the faith and leaving the faith and giving them the ammunition necessary to keep them in the way. And I say that because there's a new phenomenon that has come into Christianity. Raise your hand if you've heard the phrase deconstructionism. Deconstructionism is deceitful, it's deliberately deceptive, it's unmistakably intentional. And what it does is it says challenge your preconceived Christian thinking, but it makes the fundamental error of removing the anatomy textbook. You know, medicine evolves. It finds better and more efficient techniques. But in the process of refining the technique, it doesn't throw away the anatomy textbook. It simply reevaluates the information it has. And that's what makes deconstructionism so lethal. It throws out the Bible. And once you throw out the foundation of your faith, you've got nothing on which to make any kind of evaluation from that point forward. As a matter of fact, I saw something just the other day. Not only are people deconstructing, when they deconstruct, when they leave the faith, they're also being debaptized. Have you seen that? Being debaptized, friends that they'll grab a blowing machine. And what they will do is symbolically, the person that was once a believer, once water baptized, they will blow them down with a blower, symbolizing that they've been dried from the waters of baptism and they've now made a clear break from Christianity. Why am I here? Because of the mothers and the grandmothers who with tears in their eyes have said to me, Billy, we sent our son, our grandson, daughter, granddaughter off to university in August, and by the time they came home in December for Christmas break in their freshman year, they had completely renounced their Christian faith because it takes a university professor 4 months to completely destroy what it was we thought we built over 18 years. And let me say it, I've got to say it this way. And the kids are raised in church. They never miss service. They never miss youth group. They go to camp. They go to convention. And yet in 4 months, the university professor completely undoes everything that was done in 18 years. And here's the reason why. We are leaving our kids completely defenseless because we give them an experience without understanding. Let me say it another way. What I believe in my heart must make sense in my mind if it's going to stick. It cannot be an experiential faith. It must be an intellectual faith because the Bible tells us that when we worship with our heart, with our soul, and we do not check our brain at the door. Can I say this and not be unkind like we Pentecostals do? and we make the Holy Spirit the accomplice in our laziness. Okay, I better move on. You all that remember me, I had a tendency to say things that were just truthful. I had a pastor. He had me back in February. He said, I'm never having you back. I had a statement to make about Hamas, what they were doing to the Jews. And it wasn't a politically correct statement. And I just preached at this church a few weeks ago. There's humor in that, and I feel like I've missed in delivering the punchline. My topic today is personal perspective and objective truth. Everybody's got a perspective. Let me say it another way. Everybody's got a worldview. Slide number 8, please, if you don't mind. Everybody has what we call a worldview. And does the worldview really matter? You better know it does. Slide number 9. There's a guy by the name of Tyler Robinson who had a worldview which said conversations disagreeing with his perspective, specifically as it regards the subject of transgenderism, are completely disallowed. And therefore, if you speak about something I disagree with, violence becomes justified to silence your dissident. And that's what Utah Valley University on 9/10 was all about. There's another man that is sitting in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, a man by the name of Luigi Mangione, 27 years of age, because Mangione had the impassioned worldview and belief that the murder of a health insurance CEO was justified because of the outrageous money the CEO made the year before. This guy, Brian Thompson, made $10.2 million, but it still does not justify the fact that he was assassinated early on a December morning in Midtown Manhattan back in 2024, leaving behind a wife and 2 teenage sons. But based on his perspective and his understanding of the world, he found assassination justifiable. And in my mind, even more tragic than these two heinous acts is the heartless celebration that we see over these two murders taking place all around the country. Next slide, please, if you don't mind. As people, next slide, please, if you don't mind. As people, I missed one, I guess. As people are ruthlessly and heartlessly celebrating the assassination of these two men. The lady standing on the street corner. Who does that? We haven't just lost our civility, we've lost our humanity somewhere in the process of this great enlightenment. What's America's fate, ladies and gentlemen? I got to move on. If our thinking continues on this present trajectory, everybody's got a worldview. What is a worldview? It is a fundamental way of understanding how things operate around us. It affects the way we acquire information. Some of you watch CNN, others watch MSNBC, others watch Fox. Those of you that want to make a new chocolate cake, some of you go to the internet, some of you go to the shopping network, the Food Network, others go to the old Betty Crocker cookbook. It's based on your worldview. That worldview determines how you're going to spend money. It determines how you're going to live life. You all remember my daughter, Ashley. She's not going to have mashed potatoes and stuffing and turkey and gravy for Thanksgiving dinner. She lives her life a little bit differently. She's taking her kids to the bowling alley, and they're going to buy pizza and hot dogs and hamburgers and French fries and bowl the afternoon away on Thanksgiving because she has a different perspective regarding the world in which she lives. Let me say it another way. Let me give you a simple illustration. If I'm standing on the front lawn, and my neighbor races over and says to me, I've just seen a UFO, the first thing I do is my worldview is activated and I begin processing the information I've just heard. And in that, I establish what is called a theory or a hypothesis. I think to myself, well, maybe it's a weather balloon. Biden's not in office, so we know it's not a Chinese weather balloon. Maybe it's an airplane, commercial liner, military jet. Who knows? Maybe it is a shooting star. Maybe it is a comet. Maybe it's a spaceship. Maybe my neighbor's been drinking again too much. If they're like my son Zachariah, maybe they've been smoking too much pot again. Don't smoke pot. It makes you stupid. Oh, listen to me. I have a son that smoked pot morning, night, and noon, and if there was another time of the day, he would have smoked it then too. Pot makes you stupid. And it makes you paranoid. I'm just a father talking to you. Smoke it if you want. All you're doing is sabotaging your life. But whatever. I got a better idea. Instead of spending your money on pot, invest in some crypto. Learn how to play the crypto game. Do something productive with your moolah. Parents? My Christian worldview says they saw a UFO. Maybe it's those principalities and powers, those rulers of darkness, that spiritual wickedness in high places. Maybe it's something having to do with the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. That's how I would process that kind of information. Your worldview is comprehensive. But understand something, most of the time our worldview is based on opinion. I took my wife to the hockey game 2 weeks ago. We parked over on the North Shore, General Robinson, 4 lanes. There's not a soul parked on the street, not a soul parked on the street except my car. There's not a car on the street driving except one. And we come up out of the tram, we parked at PNC, took the tram over because it's free to park, not $35. Took the tram back. I'm coming up out of the tram. I'm on the sidewalk, about to walk across the street and get in the car. And the one and only vehicle that's on the road, 4 lanes wide, doesn't just graze my wife's car. He hits it so hard, he completely totals it. So now we're having a conversation. Ford, General Motors, Dodge. But these aren't things that you can come to truth about. These are just a matter of preference. Italian, Chinese, or Mexican. Whew. I haven't eaten yet today. That makes me hungry. Do I vacation at the beach or do I make my way to the mountains? Most of the time, what we believe to be truth is simply a matter of opinion. And when we try to move beyond preference to issues of truth, most of the time we are incapable of doing it because we don't have sufficient information. Let me say it another way. This is what I tell the young adults all the time. We are constantly pushing our youth for what I call anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is evidence from an experience. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's even biblical. The man born blind was interrogated. How is it that you now see? And he says, I have no idea if it was Arminianism or Calvinism. All I know is once I was blind, but now I see. There is a place for anecdotal evidence. But the moment your kid stands up and somebody says Jesus Christ is just a figment of history's imagination, he did not live, our kids begin to recoil. They should never recoil. They should know the name Celsus. They should know the name Suetonius. They should know what the Torah is, the Talmud is. That's what I'm trying to say. They should know the names of 23 extra biblical authors who spoke about the life and the death, and they called it the superstition of his resurrection. 23 people outside the Bible attest to the historical Jesus. Understand something, gang. Your belief in Jesus Christ isn't based simply on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's based on 23 other people who hated Christ. who fought Christianity with everything they had, but they still had to acknowledge, yes, there is a Jesus, and his grave is empty. Oh, so they'll come up with the swoon theory. They'll come up with the hallucination theory. They'll come up with the disciples still, come on, all kinds of theories that are completely frail in their logical outcome and conclusion. I've got to move on. Worldview. Where am I in all this? Oh, when I get back home, I speak to Hindus and those of the pantheistic worldview all the time. I've got a group of students from 5 different universities I'm going to speak to the Sunday before Thanksgiving. There's a group of Hindus that do not believe they don't even believe in reality. They would say that this right here is not real, it is just imagined. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? All right, German idealism. Point number 1. Okay, 3 people smiled. Slide 13, the term worldview was introduced during a philosophical movement called German idealism. It took place in the 1800s. It originated with a man by the name of Immanuel Kant. This is interesting. Kant said that a worldview is the bridging together of 2 philosophical thoughts, empiricism and rationalism. And yet he said when you bridge empiricism and rationalism together, still understand you don't really know that you can believe it. Well, are we all on the same page? You will understand that when you're dealing in secular universities, most of the time you're dealing with what's called circular reasoning or self-refuting arguments. Let me just have your attention one more time. When your professor or teacher stands up and says to you, there's no such thing as truth, don't say, Jesus said, I'm the way, I'm the truth. Please don't say that. If your professor says to you, there's no such thing as truth, just simply say, is that true? When your professor says there's no such thing as moral absolutes, cheat on the test. You have permission to cheat on the test when they say there's no such thing as moral absolutes. And you parents are writing big tuition checks every month to educate your kids because that's the way the system is established. And I understand that, I get that. So he's trying to bridge these 2 philosophical trains of thinking. Next slide, please, if you would. Rationalism. Slide number 14, rationalism. Is that 14? Back, please. One ahead. Okay, I'm just going to have to wing it. My presentations are PowerPoint driven, but I'm going to have to wing it. Let me give you an example of rationalism. Rationalism simply said truth is derived from reason, logic, understanding. Let me give you 2 examples of why that's not necessarily the case. They used to say that the earth was flat. I met a lady not long ago. She said, the earth is flat. Furthermore, your salvation depends on it. I said, have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Francis Magellan? Ferdinand Magellan. Well, we'll forget the truth. And circumnavigating the globe back in the 1600s. Never mind the fact that all the way back to Plato and Aristotle and Ptolemy and Pythagoras, they knew the earth was round. But even today, despite the overwhelming empirical evidence, some people say the earth is flat. Let me give you another example of why rationalism fails. He's 69 years of age. He stepped out of the White House when he was 67. The federal government did not pay him his last 3 paychecks. And so to make money, his properties weren't drawing enough income, and so to make money, he established a distillery producing whiskey, George Washington. So one day, he goes out, he's riding his horse, it's raining, it's snowing, he's out for 6 hours, he comes in, doesn't take his wet clothes off, he has a dinner engagement there at the house with some guests, he comes down with a sore throat. The next day, instead of staying in and mending his sore throat, he goes back out, he rides for another 5 hours. That next night, he comes in, he can hardly breathe because he has such an infection in his throat. They call out the doctor brings a formula. of honey, butter, molasses, and ground up beetles. And they have him drink this formula of molasses, butter, honey, and ground up beetles. The situation doesn't get any better, it gets worse. And so what they do is, man, we need to call a doctor in and start bleeding him. They bleed him once, thinking that the infection will be removed from the blood. They bleed him twice, they bleed him 3 times. They take 40% of his blood volume. Now understand, George Washington's a big, strong, 6'3", strapping, robust man. And yet from a sore throat, because he is mistreated, that's not the right word, he dies prematurely. That's how he died. That's rationalism. I've got to have the next slide. Do you have a slide there with like 2 strange diagrams on it? A picture with a bunch of... How do you, I got to think on my feet up here. That's kind of hard for me to do. Oh, here's one. I'll just give you one. No, here we go. Football time. People down at the Steeler game all the time. People go to the Steeler games. Oh, I'm running out of time anyway. And they say, man, I need some whiskey. I need some beer. I'm cold. I need some whiskey to get warmed up. You know what I'm talking about, some of you. So they drink their whiskey and they get the sensation of being warm. The reason is because whiskey is what they call a vasodilator. The vasodilator causes the blood to run to the surface of the skin. What's really happening is this. It gives the body the sensation of being warm, but actually the blood is being drawn away from the internal organs, the core of the body, and while your body feels warmer, it's actually cooler. I'm talking about rationalism. And then we also have empiricism, but I'm not going to go into that. Other than to say, do you realize the taste of your food is affected by its color? Because the power of perception is that strong. That's why they're using red dye 40 and blue dye 3 and those other dyes that are carcinogens, because it makes your food more attractive. Because if your food was bland and insipid looking, you wouldn't buy it. It would just stay on the shelf. Therefore, they make your Cocoa Puffs or whatever they are bright yellow instead of a dingy white. Here's the problem with empiricism and rationalism. They don't explain how a Jewish carpenter dying on a Roman cross could ever redeem the whole of mankind back to God the Father. It moves so far beyond that. Give me that slide number 17, if you don't mind, please. Lindsay, thank you. Slide 17, this is a guy by the name of James Sire. He wrote a book naming the elephant. He said worldviews consist of 2 things. Number 1, assumptions, and number 2, questions. And most of the time our questions are based on our assumptions. And our assumptions most of the time are matters of right and wrong. Right and wrong, right and wrong, right and wrong. But what happens when society becomes so pessimistic that it no longer gauges its behavior on right and wrong? That's what happened in the 1950s when a philosophical movement from Europe invaded the universities of our country. And that philosophical movement can be characterized by the phrase, what may be right for you isn't necessarily right for me. It's called postmodernism. Postmodernism, what it does is it basically relegates truth to identity, and the moment that truth is subordinate to identity, society loses its discernment. That's where we are. We've lost our discernment in this country. Let me read something to you. Slide number 19, Harold Pinter. This guy won the Nobel Prize. And now listen, this is who educates our kids. This guy's smart. He said there are no hard distinctions between what is real and what is unreal. Next slide, please. Between what is true and what is false. A thing is not necessarily true or false. It can be both true and false. So much for Aristotle's law of truth, the law of non-contradiction. Law of non-contradiction simply says this: it cannot be raining and not raining at the same time and in the same place. It's not possible. I don't have time to go into this. But 2 plus 2 cannot equal 4 and another number. 2 plus 2 either equals 4 or another number, but it cannot equal both. We all on the same page? I don't have time to go into this. Pluto's beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm glad Denise isn't with me. She'd rake me over the coals. Man, you just go on and go on and go on. I'm like a real estate agent. I've got a lot of closings, but I never can seem to, land the plane. You say, man, hey, Billy, I'm not a postmodernist. I know you're not, but your kids are. Or your grandkids are, and you don't even know it. Because they have been brainwashed successfully. And the problem we run into is this. Slide number 22. Christianity is a religion of absolutes. That means it is inflexible. You cannot move the fence. Chesterton made this statement. He said, when removing a fence, it's imperative to ask why it was put there in the first place. You cannot move the fence in Christianity and still have Christianity, because the Bible tells us that Christianity is a religion of absolutes. There is no name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. That's filled with absolutes. John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No man can come to the Father except by me. I want to throw this out real quick. I know I'm running out of time. I understand that. I want to throw this out. Dialogue I have with university students. We're having a conversation, and the subject of rape comes up. And the consensus of the students that I'm dealing with is that you cannot say that rape is always wrong. I said, why? Because you use the absolute word always. An absolute is no, always, never, only. Those are absolutes. And they said to me, you cannot say that rape is always wrong because that is an absolute statement. And in postmodernism, there is no such thing as an absolute. Understand something. If I cannot say that rape is always wrong, that implies there are times when rape is right. And tell me what society can survive with that kind of poppycock. It's nonsense. It is the root and the basis for societal anarchy. Let me give you another quote. Slide number 23, Alvin Toffler. This guy was so bright. Back in the 50s, he was envisioning AI. He was envisioning the personal computer. For every person in the world, he was envisioning cloning back in the 50s and 60s. And this is what he said. Every person carries in their mind, let me find the notes, I want to make sure I got it right. Every person carries in their head a mental model of the world, a subjective representation of external reality. That's a true statement, but it's a dangerous truth. Every person carries in their mind a mental model of external reality. And let me say it one more time. Anytime you subordinate truth to identity, when judgments of truth, when judgments of truth are now based on individualism, that society has lost its discernment. Give me the next slide, please. That society has lost its discernment. Understand something, ladies and gentlemen. We say it's a matter of right and wrong. Our problem is this. We can't engage in conversations about right and wrong. Take that off there. I've had enough of it. We cannot engage in conversations of right and wrong until we have a conversation about this and that. And if you don't know the difference between an apple and an orange, you won't know whether or not to make orange sauce, an apple marmalade. That's what happens when truth is relegated to personal perspective. Just ask the city of New York. They're about to find out. And far too many of our people have sat at the feet of one of the greatest, this is going to be sarcastic, but one of the greatest spiritual advisors in the world. Give me slide number 27, please, Lindsay. This, I think, is the quintessential definition of where we are societally. Whatever your secret, live your own truth. Live your own truth. Do you understand the fundamental flaw with that kind of thinking? Let me give you the example of a man that lived his own truth. This guy's name is William Thomas. Next slide, please. He stunk as an NCAA male swimmer, 432 in the rankings. So he swam over at the University of Penn for 3 years. In his senior year, he decided that he would no longer swim as a man. Next slide, he came out as Lia Thomas. And those spineless NCAA officials wilted and caved under the threat of public scrutiny. God help us raise up some administrators that have some spine, some sinew, some guts, some character that will still say what the truth is. Sick of it. I'm sick of political correctness. I better move on. I may never be allowed back. We all still on the same page? Larry, you're glad you came this morning, I hope. Give me that last picture, please, Lindsay. So here he is. He takes first place in the 500 meter during the NCAA Division I swimming finals. In one of the heats, he beat all his competitors by 52 seconds. But there's no physical advantage. Don't feed me that balderdash. He ties the girl in the middle. The girl in the middle in one of the races is forced to give up her trophy because if she goes out with the trophy, what will they say? You're discriminating against the trans community. Let me say this about the trans, because I deal with a lot of this. If somebody truly has gender dysphoria, we need to be compassionate, loving, kind. We need to open our arms and be graceful and merciful. But when what I feel in my body doesn't make sense with my mind, I don't mutilate my body, I treat my thinking. Oh, wow, I'm getting some applause out here. You all remember I was very sarcastic. Okay, I guess not. Slide 29. Is that slide 29? That's slide 20. I want to meet Riley Gaines and her husband. Man, she's got some moxie. But how is this just? How is this fair? Please, Lindsay, the next slide. Let me show you the picture of a 4-year-old girl. This 4-year-old girl got up every morning before school and went to the swimming pool. Every day after school, went to the swimming pool, would forego her social life with the rest of her peers, would sacrifice her summer vacations for swimming, so that she could become the best NCAA female swimmer in the world. Of course, that's a picture of Riley Gaines. But Lia Thomas, better known as William Thomas, a man, no matter what name you want to give him, said that he was going to live his reality. But if his reality is not based on truth, society crumbles and flounders. I think I'm done. Oh yes, I've got to give you. Let me give you. Okay, I've got 1 minute. Slide 33. I've got a dog in this fight. That is he's 7 years of age there. That's Ashley's oldest boy. His name is Judah. Travels with me all the time. And Ashley calls me 3 years ago. Judah's 7 years of age at the time, 8 years, whatever it was. She calls me, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and she says, Pop, I've got to talk to you. Now understand, he goes to school in Texas. And she says, Pop, I need your help with something. Judah came home from school today, and he told me they taught him gender fluidity. What is gender fluidity? Now, they're not teaching him reading, writing, and arithmetic. A 7-year-old, they're teaching gender fluidity. That simply means you can be a boy today, girl tomorrow, and any one of 72 other genders the next day. I told her. Now, Ashley has to work an extra job, but she yanked her son out of the public school and put him in a Christian school. Slide 34. Can I have 90 more seconds, Pastor, please? Now, one of the things I said at that church that got me in hot water was I said, I hate this person. Now, they said, no, Jesus taught us that we love everybody, we just hate the sin. I'll go toe-to-toe with you on that one theologically. Lord, forgive me for hating her. She targets young girls on TikTok between the ages of 11 and 14. She practices in South Florida, and her expertise is gender modification. She's a plastic surgeon, but she focuses on young girls between the ages of 11 and 14. And let's not keep it on long, okay? And I get in trouble for these kinds of things. I understand that, but the church needs to get its head out of the sand and realize the mess that's going on out there and do something about it. I made I shouldn't say this. I made the statement a number of years ago in Indiana, and the next day I met a pastor, an Assemblies of God pastor in Indiana, and he said, I'm running for the lieutenant governorship in Indiana. So I said, how can I help you? So I made hundreds and thousands of phone calls trying to get this guy elected. And the long story short, he is now the lieutenant governor in the state of Indiana because he was a Christian that believed we need to do more. He was a Christian that believed we need to do more than just renounce the wrongdoing. We need to get into the places where legislation and public thinking is established. Oh, give me the next slide. This is the handiwork of this lady. This child is 13 years old, pink hair. She doesn't know her up from her down. Come on, she's 13. And this butcher performed a radical mastectomy on her. Next slide, if you don't mind, please. And worse yet, her mother is the one that endorsed it. You can move off that slide, please. I understand at times I'm too strong. I understand at times I'm too bold. At times I'm too forward. But the bottom line is this. This is why I'm 55. As far as I know, I'm the only full-time apologist in the Assemblies of God. As far as I know. And I have no plans of being quiet, backing down, or shutting up because this kind of mess has to stop. I'm going to close with two quotes. Quote number 42, please, Lindsay. It's a statement given by a British evangelist by the name of Gipsy Smith. He said, there are 5 Gospels, and most people will never read the first 4. There are 5 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and most people will never read the first 4. I hear the words of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 2 when he said, you are living epistles known and read before all men. And the last quote comes from Chesterton. And here's where we are. He said, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. God, raise up. Stand up for Jesus, you soldiers of the cross. Somebody told me one time, I love that song. They said, man, you like militancy, don't you? Honey, you better know I like militancy as long as we're standing up for the right thing. Stand up for Jesus, you soldiers of the cross. Lift high that royal banner. It must not suffer loss from victory unto victory. His army doth he lead until every foe is vanquished. And Christ is Lord indeed. And Lord, I exalt thee. I exalt thee. That is your cue, Lindsay. I need thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee, O Lord. Oh, I exalt thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee. Oh Lord, oh, I exalt thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee, O Lord. You've got sons and grandsons, daughters and granddaughters that are fighting for their spiritual life. I want you to stand up right now. You've got sons and granddaughters, grandsons and daughters that are being sucked into the vortex called postmodernism. I want you to pray with me right now. I want you to pray as though their eternity really is in the balance. I want you to pray like you really mean that there is a heaven and there is a hell. There is a place of eternal destiny. And so, Father, I pray today for every single son and daughter. Lord, they are attacking our kids in 3rd grade. Reading hour has become a time of liberal propaganda where postmodernism is being shoved down their throats in the form of drag queens reading books to our kids. God, help our nation. This is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is a spiritual problem. This is a moral problem. Help us, Lord God. Help us to understand this is not some game that we're playing, but this is eternity that hangs in the balance. Lord, our sons are being indoctrinated. Our daughters are being brainwashed in junior high to believe there are no such things as moral absolutes. God, they're being told there's no evidence for Christ, when the evidence says the very contrary. Lord, put your hand on our children. Come on, guys, pray with me, please. Place your hand upon our children. Lord, I'm asking that you would guard them, that you would preserve them, that you would keep them, that you would teach them, that you would uphold them. And we understand they need the sealing of the Holy Spirit, but they also need the academic of the Word. And I'm asking that we would provide them a balance in the two. May our lives be such that when people see us, they don't see someone who professes Christ, they see someone who lives Christ. Let it be. Let it be, I pray. Oh, I exalt thee. Sing it with me, all right? Oh, I exalt thee. I exalt thee, O Lord, and I exalt thee. I exalt thee. I exalt thee, O God bless you. Thank you. It has been wonderful being here with you this morning. And what a flood of memories. And thank you for your attention and your time. Pastor, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. That's it. You are dismissed, ladies and gentlemen.